What's up guys, Chris here back with a new video. Today's video is in part sponsored by APS in the form that I got this from APS via sponsorship. They were kind enough to send me some parts. In case you haven't seen that unboxing, I'll put a card up here and a link down in the description. So this is the enhanced tin-coated shell lifter or shell carrier, if you will, and I'm going to be installing that in my SAI CAM870 shotgun. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. So in order to install this, we're going to need just a few tools here. We're going to need a punch to punch out the trigger plate pins. We're going to need a small flathead screwdriver to pry off one of the spring clips. Roll of tape is optional, and a small hammer. So let me bring the 870 up. Right, so here's the actual shotgun that we're going to be working on. It's my APS CAM870 SAI model. This is not sponsored by APS. I bought this from Asia Airsoft a while ago. It's almost a year ago now. I'll put a link again in the description for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to take out the trigger plate or trigger group. And we'll do that by punching out these two pins. I recently learned an interesting fact about these pins from watching a YouTube video on the real thing. And that is that this pin at the rear wants to go from left to right on the way out. And that is because this pin is only retained by a spring clip on this side. So by punching it from the left to right, the notches in the pin only have to go past that spring clip once. This pin, however, has clips on both sides, so it doesn't really matter which way you punch it out. So what I like to do is cock the action and have the trigger group on safe. And by doing this, it's going to make it easier to remove the actual trigger plate. So let's go ahead and punch out the first pin. Trying to maneuver around my lighting setup here. And I'm just using the roll of tape under for some spacing. Now these shouldn't be very difficult to remove. Just a couple of light taps. And once you clear that left side spring clip, this should come out very easily. Repeat for the second pin. One thing that's worth mentioning is if you have some type of grip, pistol grip usually, that's covering part of the trigger plate or a trigger guard here, you're going to have to remove that first in order to get the trigger plate out. So let me just lift this up a bit. And there we go. So both pins are removed. Put the tools to the side here. And to actually take the trigger plate out, you pull, twist a little bit to the right, and lift it straight out. So you're left with an empty shotgun. Or not completely empty, but no trigger group at least. Okay, so now that we have the trigger group out, you want to make sure it is on safe, because if you accidentally pull the trigger and let the hammer go, it hurts if you have your finger in front of it. I know because I've done that. And the second reason is when yeah, I think we're going to release the hammer when working on it. That's probably best so we don't risk anything. So take it off safe, hold your thumb over the hammer, pull the trigger and let the hammer go forward. The only thing that I would be wary about when doing this is this pin right here needs to be pushed correctly into place, because otherwise this detent right here that's holding the hammer spring plunger in place might slip off and your hammer plunger will go flying. So be careful of that. We don't want that coming off. Now, once we're in this position, we need to remove this pin. Let me zoom in a little bit. We need to remove this pin right here that's holding the shell lifter in place in the carrier group. And to do that, we're going to use our thin flathead screwdriver. Come in here and pry this little spring clip off. Okay. Don't drop it like I just did. Put that to the side for now. Then we're going to come back with our punch. Now I would suggest releasing a little bit of pressure from the well, actually that should not, no, that doesn't matter. We want to push out this pin right here and make sure that your hammer plunger is still kept in place and retained. And the easiest way that I found to get the shell lifter and assembly off is you push down on this spring and it simply just pops right off like so. So this is the original one, silver. Let's do a quick check. Actually, yeah, this is just stamped steel part, and this is steel as well. So probably for material and durability sake, the tin version is not a very critical upgrade, but this is mainly for looks. So this is actually a lot nicer and shinier than the one that I have in my other CAM870, so I'm going to switch that over to that rifle. Put this to the side. And what I'm going to do before I install this is I'm going to lubricate the contacting surfaces here with some grease. I like to use this Garter Phantom gear grease, Teflon grease for AEG gearboxes. And what I do is I just trim off a Q-tip to make an applicator. Take a little bit like so and just spread on a thin coat on the surfaces where it's going to be making contact. Okay, so I got just a thin coat of grease all over this. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of regular silicone oil that I have in this applicator, and we're going to put this in here in the hinge just to make sure it's ultra smooth. Just flick this back and forth a couple of times, make sure it's moving nicely, or as nice as you could expect. Right. Now to install this, it's pretty much the reverse process. You want to make sure that the part is aligned like this, and that this washer is in place over here. You can sort of fix that later if it moves out of place. Again, be careful of the hammer plunger, and make sure your carrier dog plunger, this part right here, is in place. So we're just going to slip this on top, and this part of the carrier dog, this little ledge right here, is supposed to sit on top of the plunger and spring. So right there is where you want it. Then we're going to line up the hole on this side. Get the pin started. And we're going to line up the other side and push the pin through like so. Again, I try to check this from time to time so that it doesn't move too much. And we want to make sure that the pin is through enough so that the spring clip retaining hole is visible on here, which it is, so that's good. Then we're going to take our spring clip and start the flat end, or angular end if you will. Get that started in the cutout of the pin and just simply loop it over. Let's see, I have to do this off camera. Right, you want to make sure that it gets installed properly on here, like this. And before we put this back in the rifle, let's go ahead and cock the hammer. So put it on safe, cock the hammer. And again, I'm going to come in here and double check that this pin is really all the way. And to check the function of the shell lifter, you can simply, that's the trigger, and it went. We can simply flick it up and down like this. And it should lock in place at the top, but snap back down when you push it. You can also pull this back and try flipping it up and down. And if you hold this down, it should, it's going to feel a little bit different, basically. What I also want to do is put a little bit of grease right in here on top of this plunger where this interfaces, because that's where a lot of the friction comes from when you're racking. Besides the hammer being cocked and pushing down on the hammer spring, this is also where a lot of friction happens. So I'm just going to take my grease. It's a little bit difficult to get in here, obviously. I probably should have done this before assembling it. And before we go ahead and reinstall it into the rifle, I'm going to do one last check on this pin. And it's seated all the way properly. So let me zoom back out. Bring the rifle back in. All right, so we have the rifle back in here. And to reinstall the trigger plate, it's basically the reverse process. You want to make sure that it is on safe still. Flip it over. Push it in at a slight angle, tilted towards the right from this position. It's going to come in and just want to make sure that it's, there we go. Shouldn't take a whole lot of force. And then of course you want to make sure the pinholes line up here. It might be that you have to do some coursing to get those to line up properly to get the pins in, but you'll figure it out. And this pin can go in either way. This one we're going to do from right side to left side, so right to left, to make sure that we only go past that spring clip once. So I'm actually going to do this off camera so that I can see the pinholes better. Okay, that is it. We have the tin-coated shell lifter, shell carrier. It's bringing up and down nicely. And when you pull back forward, that's going to pop up to lift the shell from the magazine tube, force it into the chamber, and seat the round. So it looks to be working nicely. I'm going to have to dry rack a couple of shells to make sure everything's functioning properly, but it certainly looks like It's working. So there you have it. Once again, thanks to APS for sponsoring me with this part. And I will see you guys in the next video.